A corporate executive, used to bending the world to her will, decided to test a royal guard's discipline with a taser. But one unexpected move shattered her illusion of control, leaving the crowd stunned. Here's what happened. But before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another story of courage and discipline from the royal guards that you won't want to miss. The sharp click of designer heels echoed through the morning air at Buckingham Palace as Alexandra Mitchell strode purposefully through the gathering crowd. Her black Armani blazer and pencil skirt, paired with a crisp white button-down, spoke of corporate authority, while her pearl necklace caught the early sunlight with each determined step. Her dark hair was pulled back into an immaculate bun, not a single strand daring to escape its severe styling. "Move," she commanded, shouldering past a young family trying to take photos. "Some of us have actual business to conduct." Her voice carried the practiced authority of someone used to making junior executives tremble. The tourist family scattered like pigeons, the mother pulling her children close as Alexandra's leather briefcase swung dangerously near them. The morning sun had barely cleared the palace walls, but Alexandra's patience had already worn dangerously thin. As chief administrative officer at Blackwell International, she'd grown accustomed to a certain level of deference. Doors opened for her, people stepped aside, and the world generally reorganized itself to accommodate her presence. The tourists crowding the palace grounds clearly hadn't received that memo. "Ridiculous," she muttered, loud enough for nearby visitors to hear. "Don't these people have jobs? Or do they just spend all day gawking at buildings?" Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against her briefcase, a nervous habit that betrayed the constant tension thrumming beneath her polished exterior. A young mother pulling her children from Alexandra's path earned a particularly venomous glare. "Control your offspring," she snapped, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. "This isn't a playground." The mother's apologetic smile only seemed to irritate her further, as if basic human courtesy was an affront to her elevated status. Alexandra had just rounded the corner of the palace grounds when she first spotted him. The royal guard, standing at attention, his scarlet uniform a stark contrast to the ancient stones behind him. Something about his posture, his unwavering discipline, seemed to catch her attention. Perhaps it was the way he stood there, completely unbothered by the chaos around him. Or perhaps it was the fact that for the first time that morning she'd encountered something that didn't immediately acknowledge her presence. Her eyes narrowed as she took in his ceremonial uniform, the gleaming brass buttons, the towering bearskin cap. A small smile played at the corners of her perfectly painted lips. The kind of smile that had preceded the dismissal of countless subordinates who'd failed to show her proper respect. "Well," she said softly, adjusting her blazer with deliberate precision, "this should be interesting." The morning sun cast her shadow across the courtyard stones as she began moving toward the guard, her heels striking the ground with the rhythm of approaching thunder. "I saw that," she announced suddenly, her voice sharp enough to make nearby visitors turn. "Don't pretend you weren't looking." Her accusation cut through the morning air, as baseless as it was bold. The guard remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with practiced discipline. Alexandra's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together, unused to being ignored, especially by someone she considered beneath her station. "Excuse me," she stepped closer, deliberately entering his line of sight. "I'm speaking to you. I distinctly saw you watching me when I walked past." Each word dripped with the same calculated venom she used to destroy careers back at Blackwell International. Her fingers tightened around her briefcase handle, knuckles whitening beneath her dark skin. An elderly couple nearby exchanged concerned glances. The man whispered something to his wife, his bearing suggesting military background. His campaign medals caught the morning light as he shifted position, watching the scene unfold with growing concern. But Alexandra was too focused on her target to notice the mounting discomfort around her. This is exactly the type of unprofessional behavior I've come to expect from ceremonial staff, she continued, her voice rising with practiced indignation. Standing here, ogling women as they pass by, thinking your uniform gives you some kind of immunity. She took another step forward, her designer heels clicking against the stones like a countdown. The guard's composure remained unshaken, his bearing perfect despite her accusations. This only seemed to fuel Alexandra's mounting irritation. She wasn't used to her words bouncing off their target like raindrops off marble. In her world, a single word from her could end careers, freeze promotions, and shut doors permanently. "Do you have any idea who I am?" She moved even closer, her expensive perfume invading the space between them. "I am the Chief Administrative Officer of Blackwell International. One word from me, and your superiors will be explaining themselves to people who actually matter in this city." The morning sun had climbed higher, catching the brass buttons on the guard's uniform. Their gleam seemed to mock Alexandra's attempts at intimidation, reflecting back only her own increasingly frustrated expression. A small crowd had begun to gather, sensing the brewing confrontation. Parents guided their children away, while others watched with a mixture of discomfort and morbid fascination. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you," she demanded, her voice taking on the edge she usually reserved for terminating employees who dared to challenge her authority. Or is that too much to expect from someone who's basically a human mannequin? The guard's eyes remained fixed forward, trained on some distant point beyond the growing spectacle. His discipline was clearly professional, born of serious military training, but Alexandra saw only defiance. In her world, anyone who didn't immediately respond to her demands was committing an unforgivable offence. The elderly man with the military bearing had moved closer now, his wife's restraining hand on his arm. Other tourists were slowing their pace, some stopping altogether, drawn into the orbit of Alexandra's manufactured drama. But like planets around a dark star, they kept their distance, recognizing the dangerous energy radiating from her rigid posture and clenched jaw. "Still nothing to say for yourself?" Alexandra pulled out her phone, making sure everyone nearby could see its diamond-studded case catching the sunlight. "I wonder what the palace administration would think about a guard harassing female visitors." Her voice carried the same tone she used when ending careers at Blackwell International. A young mother hurriedly pulled her children away, recognizing the signs of escalating aggression. The veteran couple shifted uneasily, their years of service giving them a sixth sense for brewing trouble. The old soldier's medals clinked softly as he adjusted his stance, ready to intervene if necessary. "Let me explain something to you," Alexandra hissed, moving even closer to the guard. "I destroy careers for breakfast. Just last week, I had a department head demoted because he didn't stand quickly enough when I entered the room." Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "And he was actually somebody important." The veteran stepped forward, his bearing reflecting decades of military service. "Madam, perhaps you should—" "Stay out of this," Alexandra snapped without even turning, "unless you'd like to explain to the board of directors why their morning meeting was delayed because of palace staff misconduct." The threat was hollow. She had no meeting, no real purpose here except feeding her need for dominance, but threats had become her native language. "I have the Chief of Metropolitan Police on speed dial," she continued, waving her phone like a weapon. "One call, and your superiors will be explaining themselves to people who actually matter in this city. People who understand the real world, not this tourist circus." The guard's perfect stillness only fueled her rage. His disciplined posture and forward gaze felt like a personal affront to her authority. An authority that had grown bloated from years of corporate power. "You know what's truly pathetic?" She circled him again, her heels striking the stones with increasing force. "It's not just your silence, it's that you actually believe this ceremony means something in today's world." She gestured dismissively at his uniform. "While real professionals are making million-pound decisions, you're standing here playing dress-up." The crowd had grown larger, forming a loose circle around the unfolding drama. Two palace security officers had noticed the commotion and were beginning to make their way through the gathering throng. But Alexandra was too consumed by her performance to notice their approach. "I could have you directing traffic by tomorrow morning," she threatened, her composure cracking further with each word that failed to provoke a response. "One call to the right person, and this little soldier fantasy of yours ends." Her fingers flew across her phone's screen. "Shall we test that theory?" The guard remained motionless, but there was something in his bearing now, not fear or anger, but the kind of patience that comes from facing real threats in real combat. This was a man who had probably seen action in Afghanistan or Iraq, who had faced enemies more dangerous than an entitled executive with an inflated sense of power. "I've dealt with stubborn men before," she said, her voice dropping dangerously. "Men who thought their position, their uniform, their principles made them immune to consequences." She leaned closer, her expensive perfume invading his space. "Would you like to know what happened to them?" The veteran's wife whispered something urgent to her husband, both of them recognizing the look of someone about to cross a line. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across Alexandra's face, revealing something ugly beneath her polished exterior. "This is your absolute last chance," she announced, her voice carrying the finality of someone who'd made an irrevocable decision. "Acknowledge me. Apologize. Show some basic human respect." She paused, waiting for a response she knew wouldn't come. "No? Still nothing?" Her hand moved to her briefcase again, fingers searching with deliberate purpose. "Very well. Let's see how well your training prepared you for this." Alexandra's manicured fingers closed around the taser in her briefcase. Sleek, matte black, and far more expensive than standard civilian models. A gift from her board of directors for her recent promotion, meant for protection in London's rougher areas. She'd never actually used it, but its presence had always given her a sense of control, of power over any situation. "You know what I've learned in corporate life?" she said, voice dropping to an intimate whisper as she partially withdrew the weapon, keeping it concealed against her black blazer. "Sometimes respect needs to be enforced." The morning sun caught her pearl necklace as she shifted her weight, positioning herself strategically beside the guard. The veteran couple noticed the subtle change in her posture, the predatory shift in her stance. "Dear God," the old soldier muttered, already moving forward. His wife's restraining hand had fallen away, both of them recognizing the look of someone about to cross a fatal line. But they were too far away, the crowd too dense to reach her in time. "Final opportunity," Alexandra announced, thumb finding the activation switch with practiced ease. The small device hummed to life, its sound lost in the general noise of the courtyard. "Either acknowledge me properly, or learn why people at Blackwell International don't ignore me twice." Her words carried the weight of someone who'd made an irrevocable decision. The guard's military experience must have sensed the approaching attack. There was a subtle tension in his muscles, an almost imperceptible shift beneath his ceremonial uniform. But his training, his duty, kept him rooted in place, maintaining his post even as danger approached. Alexandra's movement was sudden, precise, and utterly deliberate. The taser emerged from behind her blazer like a viper striking, its metal contacts seeking vulnerable flesh beneath the thick red uniform. Her face showed no hesitation, no remorse, only the cold satisfaction of someone used to forcing the world to bend to their will. The weapon made contact with devastating effect. Blue electricity arced through the morning air, the crack of discharge echoing off the palace walls. Thousands of volts surged through the guard's body, causing his muscles to contract involuntarily. The pain was immediate and intense, like liquid fire coursing through his veins. "Not so stoic now, are you?" Alexandra's voice carried a note of triumph as she maintained the pressure, pushing the taser harder against the guard's uniform. The weapon hummed with malicious energy, sending waves of electricity through the ceremonial fabric. But her moment of victory was about to turn to ashes in her mouth. The guard's reaction defied both the electricity coursing through him and normal human limitations. Instead of crumpling to the ground as Alexandra had anticipated, years of military training and iron discipline took over. His jaw clenched until tendons stood out like cables beneath his skin, teeth gritting against the searing pain that threatened to overwhelm him. His feet, though trembling slightly, remained planted firmly on the stones of the courtyard, as if rooted there by something stronger than mere physical endurance. A collective gasp rose from the shocked crowd. Parents shielded their children's eyes, tourists backed away in horror, and several people shouted for help. The veteran couple broke into a run, their faces set with grim determination. Palace security, already approaching, accelerated their pace at the sound of the electrical discharge. "Look at your precious discipline now," Alexandra taunted, her voice tight with vindictive pleasure. She pressed the weapon harder, as if trying to drive her superiority through his very flesh. The morning air crackled with ozone as another surge of electricity arced between them. "Not quite the untouchable soldier anymore, are you?" But even as the words left her mouth, something changed in the guard's bearing. The trembling in his legs ceased. His shoulders, which had tensed reflexively at the initial shock, squared themselves with military precision, and in his eyes, those eyes that had remained fixed forward throughout her entire tirade, something awakened. Not anger, not pain, but the cold, calculating focus of a warrior who had faced far worse than electrical current in real combat. The crowd fell absolutely silent, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. The veteran had stopped running, recognition dawning on his weathered face. He'd seen that look before, in dusty war zones, where ceremony gave way to survival, where training transformed into instinct, where soldiers showed what they were truly capable of. Alexandra, still drunk on her perceived victory, failed to notice the change. She was too focused on her moment of dominance, on finally breaking the guard's composure. The taser hummed in her grip as she pressed it harder against his uniform. Her dark lips curved in a savage smile of triumph. "See?" she called out to her unwilling audience, her voice carrying the same tone she used when destroying careers in boardroom meetings. "This is what happens when you ignore people who actually matter. When you think your little costume and your ceremony make you special. This is what real power looks like. This is what happens when—" She never finished that sentence. With a control that defied both the electricity coursing through his body and normal human limitations, the guard's white-gloved hand shot out like a striking cobra. His fingers found Alexandra's wrist with unerring precision, catching it in a grip forged by years of close-quarter combat training. The movement was smooth, measured, and devastatingly effective. Not the ceremonial precision tourists photographed, but the lethal efficiency of a soldier who had faced death in the dust of Afghanistan. The taser clattered to the ground with a metallic ring, its arc of electricity dying with a final angry spark. Alexandra's eyes widened in disbelief, her perfect composure crumbling as she found herself completely immobilized. The guard's grip wasn't cruel or punishing, but it carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had earned their position through more than ceremony, through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication to duty. "How dare you!" she shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that made nearby pigeons take flight. She tried to pull away, her designer heels scraping uselessly against the ancient stones. "Do you know who I—" "That will be quite enough, madam." The guard's voice cut through her protests like a combat knife through silk, quiet but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who had faced Taliban fire and IED blasts. His eyes, when they finally met hers, held not anger or hatred, but something far more terrifying. The controlled power of a warrior who had chosen this precise moment to break protocol. 8 years of combat service, he continued, his voice carrying across the now silent courtyard. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 in Iraq. This uniform isn't a costume, madam. These medals weren't won in corporate boardrooms. His grip remained steady, professional, exactly calibrated to control without causing harm. While you were threatening secretaries and bullying subordinates, I was carrying wounded comrades through enemy fire. Alexandra struggled against his hold, her carefully maintained image shattering like thin ice. Her hair, perfectly styled just minutes ago, had come loose from its severe bun, strands falling across her face as she twisted uselessly against the immovable grip. "Let go of me! I'll have your career for this! I'll have your entire unit disbanded!" "You just assaulted a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces," the guard stated, each word precise as rifle fire, "with a prohibited weapon on palace grounds. The minimum sentence is 5 years. His eyes hadn't left hers, boring into her with the same intensity that had once tracked insurgents across desert landscapes. "Your corporate connections won't help you here." The veteran stepped forward, his campaign medals catching the morning light. "I served with men like him," he announced to the gathered crowd. "That uniform represents more than ceremony. Those medals? They're not for show. They're earned in blood and sacrifice." He turned to Alexandra, his voice carrying decades of military authority. "You just attacked a combat veteran who's faced enemies you couldn't imagine, with a weapon you thought would give you power. How does it feel to discover what real strength looks like?" Palace security had formed a cordon now, their faces showing the professional gravity of men who understood exactly how serious this situation was. Their eyes took in every detail: the discarded taser, the scorch mark on the guard's uniform, where electricity had arced through ceremonial fabric, Alexandra's increasingly desperate struggles against a hold she couldn't break. "The thing about real power," the guard said, his voice carrying the weight of battlefield wisdom, "is that it doesn't need to attack others to prove itself. True authority is earned through service, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to duty, concepts I suspect are foreign to you." Alexandra's threats had devolved into incoherent rage, her corporate armor completely stripped away to reveal the small, frightened person beneath. Her designer suit was disheveled, her makeup smeared, her carefully constructed image of power lying in shambles around her like the scattered contents of her dropped briefcase. "You will be charged with assault on military personnel, possession of a prohibited weapon, and criminal trespass on palace grounds," the security officer stated, his voice carrying the weight of years of service. He produced the handcuffs with practiced efficiency, the metal gleaming in the morning sun. "I suggest you exercise your right to remain silent. Your corporate lawyers won't find any loopholes here. The Crown takes attacks on its servicemen very seriously." The guard released her wrist with the same controlled precision he'd used to capture it, the movement fluid and professional. As he stepped back to allow security to take custody, his bearing transformed seamlessly from combat-ready warrior back to ceremonial sentry. His eyes fixed forward once again, resuming their vigilant watch, though the slightly darker patch on his uniform remained, a testament to the attack he'd endured and overcome. "This is outrageous!" Alexandra fought against the handcuffs as they clicked into place, her composure completely shattered. "Do you have any idea who I am? The board of directors will hear about this. I'll have this entire unit investigated." Her voice bounced off the palace walls, its previous authority now reduced to shrill desperation. "I know exactly who you are," the veteran interrupted, stepping forward. His campaign medals caught the morning light as he spoke, each one representing battles fought in defense of the very principles Alexandra had just attacked. "You're someone who mistook ceremony for weakness, who thought a fancy title and an expensive weapon made you powerful." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd earned his status through real service. "But here's what you failed to understand. These grounds are protected by men and women who've faced real enemies, not boardroom bullies. They've earned their authority through blood, sweat, and sacrifice." The morning sun cast harsh shadows across the scene, highlighting every detail of Alexandra's fall from power. Her perfect bun had come completely undone, dark hair falling in disarray around her face. The designer suit she'd worn like armor was wrinkled and askew, her silk blouse untucked, her heels scuffed from scraping against the ancient stones. Despite the electrical attack, the guard's uniform remained a study in martial precision. Every button gleaming, every crease knife-sharp, his bearing a testament to discipline that ran soul-deep. Two more security officers arrived, taking positions on either side of Alexandra. As they began to lead her away, her designer heels that had clicked so confidently across the courtyard now stumbled and scraped. The contents of her dropped briefcase lay scattered across the stones. Her diamond-encrusted phone, the gold-plated makeup compact, designer sunglasses, and the leather wallet bulging with platinum credit cards. Each item a symbol of the superficial power she'd wielded so carelessly, now rendered meaningless in the face of true authority. "Careful with her," the guard spoke suddenly, his voice carrying an unexpected note of professional courtesy. "Whatever her crimes, we maintain our standards." Even in victory, his conduct remained impeccable, offering Alexandra a final lesson in true dignity that she was in no state to appreciate. Security nodded in acknowledgement, adjusting their hold to be firm but proper. The veteran's wife, watching this display of professional restraint, approached the guard with eyes full of concern and admiration. "Are you all right, son?" she asked softly, her voice carrying maternal worry. "That was quite a shock you took." The guard's response was crisp, professional, yet carried a warmth that honoured her concern. "Thank you, ma'am. All in the line of duty." No trace of the pain he must have endured coloured his voice. No hint of the electrical assault that would have dropped most men. Instead, his tone carried only the quiet pride of someone who had upheld their oath, protected their post, and maintained their dignity in the face of attack. As the crowd began to disperse, the veteran turned to his wife. "That, my dear," he said quietly, "is why these men stand guard. Not just over buildings and grounds, but over principles, dignity, duty, respect. Values that no amount of corporate power or expensive weapons can overcome." The guard had already resumed his post, his eyes once again fixed forward, his bearing showing no sign of the ordeal he'd just endured. The only evidence of the confrontation was a small scorch mark on his scarlet tunic, a badge of honour that spoke of duty maintained in the face of adversity. Behind him, Buckingham Palace stood as it had for centuries, its ancient stones having witnessed yet another lesson in the difference between true authority and borrowed power. The morning sun caught the guard's brass buttons one final time, their gleam a reminder that some things, honour, duty, sacrifice, shine brightest when tested. Alexandra's voice could still be heard faintly as she was escorted to the waiting police vehicle, her threats now falling on deaf ears. She'd arrived believing her corporate position made her untouchable, that her expensive taser gave her power over others. She left learning that real strength isn't found in weapons or titles, but in the unwavering dedication to duty that had kept the guard standing tall even as electricity coursed through his body. The veteran couple lingered a moment longer, exchanging knowing looks before departing. "Some lessons," the old soldier remarked, touching his campaign medals, "can only be taught by those who've earned the right to teach them." The guard's shadow stretched long across the courtyard. As a new group of tourists approached, his presence a living reminder that while corporate empires rise and fall, while threats come and go, true dignity stands firm, as immovable as the palace walls themselves, as enduring as the principles these guards are sworn to protect. What would you have done in that guard's position? Would you have maintained such iron discipline in the face of not just disrespect, but physical assault? The guard's response showed us that true strength isn't about attacking others, but about standing firm in your principles, even when literally under fire. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's inflated sense of authority crumbled in the face of genuine strength? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your experiences with those who mistake titles for true power. Remember to like this video if you believe in standing firm against disrespect, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about the royal guards who serve as living symbols of dignity and duty. Hit that bell icon to ensure you never miss our daily uploads. You can see more incredible stories about royal guards appearing on your screen right now. Each one teaches us something valuable about honor, duty, and what it means to stand guard over not just places but principles. Until next time, remember, real power isn't in the weapons we carry or the titles we hold. It's in the unwavering dedication to duty that keeps us standing tall even in our most challenging moments.